Now, the telecom sector is responsible for a significant amount of carbon emissions due to the energy consumption of network equipment and data centers. But at the same time, there's the need for higher speed internet. The telecom sector plays a crucial role in our modern society, as you all very well know, providing high-speed communication and connectivity to citizens worldwide. However, as the sector continues to grow, so does its carbon footprint. Now, according to recent studies, the global telecom industry is responsible for over 2% of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. The urgency to decarbonize the telecom sector is multifaceted. Not only does this sector contribute to climate change, but it also has the potential to support sustainable development goals. And this is important because what to do? We have to improve our broadband theory and, of course, connectivity. But at the same time, we cannot afford to keep contributing to carbon emission. This is what we're talking about in the first half of this show. And joining me to have this conversation is Diseye Isoun, an expert on African broadband and digital infrastructure. Thank you so much, Diseye, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, going straight to the conversation, I'm just going to go straight and ask the first question, which to me is the most important. Is it possible to achieve broadband development and decarbonization of the telecom sector at the same time?
Yes, I do think it is possible. I think it's a thread that needs to be threaded carefully. But indeed, I think it is possible. I'll give you some statistics that are sometimes useful. The total amount of base stations in Nigeria is something around 30 to 35,000. And the diesel generators in those base stations emit as much carbon footprint as all of Japan in total, as an example. And so the swapping out, let's call it the transition from diesel to more sustainable, renewable energy, is doable, and I have a few thoughts there. While the future design of base stations can be done such that they are more environmentally friendly, they take less power, and actually through that they can also empower youth, because you can now make broadband more local, use smaller base stations and more of them, and less and more environmentally friendly at the same time. So I think it takes some careful planning, but it is possible.
Right. Now, while strong improvements have been made at demand and offer levels, Africa still has the biggest coverage and usage gaps in the world. Why do you think that is for so long a time?
Yeah, I think the big telcos who have done a great job in connecting people for basic things, texting, simple WhatsApps, communicating with the village, doing some basic business with your supplier for your agricultural goods. This kind of low throughput connectivity is quite prevalent and does work relatively well in Africa. However, to move to high-speed broadband, you need a slightly different model. I always give the example that in developing countries, 85% of broadband is through ISPs, traditional ISPs, and 15% is through the mobile telcos, like the MTNs, etc. Whereas in Africa, about 95% of broadband is through our phones, and only about 5% through the local ISPs and through fixed wireless and fiber. So we cannot run our whole requirement and backbone, let's say, on mobile. So part of any plan to deepen penetration of broadband must include empowering ISPs and making sure that the whole effort doesn't come from the telcos, who are really more of voice companies at their DNA. They're trying to enter broadband, but they certainly could use some help.
All right. Now, this is the 21st century, and African leaders still weaponize the internet against the citizens, especially during unrest. We've seen this happen across different African countries. So with this in mind, is this the right time to be discussing a broader usage of it or a better usage of it?
Yeah, I think we need better monitoring systems and better oversight so that I would say that there's some kind of not always productive mix of rumor, assumptions, guesses versus also perhaps not the best communication by those that can influence the internet access, so that we do have, let's call it accurate information. You may get a slowdown in your internet or you cannot connect, and you associate that immediately with some kind of regulation. However, it could be a fiber cut, it could be an issue of a lot of people on at the same time, which because there's some event in the country or there is protest, there may be added pressure on the network. So I think being able to ensure that we have transparency and we have a way in which to monitor these types of downtimes, I think is most critical.
Right. Again, just for a better understanding, why is it important to decarbonize the telecom sector?
Because ultimately, one, at the base of it is that it's good for Nigerians to breathe clean air, to live in a place where their health care and their quality of life is effectively not affected by having a base station that is pushing out fumes of diesel, day after day, in many instances, 24 hours a day, because a lot of our power backbone is unreliable. So a lot of the telcos just default to some extent to diesel in many instances. And secondly, it can create jobs. It's as simple as you can imagine a situation where you are putting in solar panels, you're putting in batteries, which is ubiquitous across the country, so everyone would benefit. And then ultimately, this also helps from an economic perspective. And there's a lot of incentive around the world to reduce carbon emissions. So we should be able to work with our global partners on this.
So we've established the reason for the importance of broadband development for decarbonization, but I want us to also find out what the reason for broadband development is, because some would argue that, I mean, there's good enough usage in Nigeria especially, maybe not in Africa generally, but many people will say, oh, a lot of Nigerians already have access to, technology. So is there a need to improve the usage?
Yes, I think quite specifically and obviously perhaps education. The kind of connectivity you need to do good research, to carry out certain kinds of academic practice requires more than just tethering your phone. Most Nigerian students get on the internet by tethering their phone mobile to their laptop, which is not the ideal way to connect. Healthcare facilities also need high-speed broadband. Commercial centers also need significant amount of broadband, banking sector, and young people engaging, creating businesses. If there's ultimately a tourism industry improvement, all these entertainment, creating content, all these things that we do get involved with and can generate dollars for young Nigerians requires broadband. And so ultimately it has its negatives if it's not managed or if it's not rolled out properly, but there are a lot of benefits to being connected.
All right. Now, there exist contextual and ecological factors within developing context that must inform the choice, the type, and the timing of deployment of broadband technologies. What could some of these factors be?
Well, for example, I think good broadband ultimately should be relatively localized. For example, if your phone stops connecting or you can't get on internet, there's no number you can call to say, I cannot get onto my phone internet. But if you're a middle-class Nigerian or you have your family, your internet goes off in your house, most places of the world you can make a call and get support. And so what we need to ultimately do is build out local ISPs who know their backyard, can sell to the local plaza, the hospital, the school, friends, etc., and connect that area to which they live and they know, and literally have to sometimes physically go to support people to stay on the internet. So this kind of small ISP approach, I think, builds jobs and ultimately is also much more environmentally friendly because those base stations are much smaller and less power hungry.
So, do you think that these two concepts, especially the one relating to broadband technology, can in turn better the economy of the African continent, especially Nigeria? Is there any correlation?
Yes, I do believe so because one of our strengths is our young people who are very entrepreneurial. And so if, for example, you franchise, it's almost you think of a McDonald's. McDonald's is a company, but many people own McDonald's businesses and make money that way. So you can have an ISP who franchises out to local folks and ISPs who run an ISP business and they connect, 50 to 100 people and they make a business for themselves. This is the way in which I think we can also empower youths while also providing broadband penetration.
Right. Now, according to analysis, the global broadband market is set to grow from 1.4 billion subscribers in 2023 to 1.8 billion in 2028. We cannot afford to be lost, but it seems that we're still so backwards as a continent. Is it possible that we can ever catch up?
We can, and I think each country has to deal with its own challenges and strengths. The current Honorable Minister of Communication Innovation has a fiber initiative, which should help empower our backbone, give us and give ISPs a stronger backbone. And like I said, I think certain policies that will strengthen small ISPs, who will then leverage that and also hopefully find cheaper and more renewable, sustainable ways to connect people to the internet. I think it is indeed possible for us to step up to that challenge.
So, bearing in mind also the possibility of digital fraud, because we've talked extensively about the importance of, better technology, higher end technology, but let's also remember that there are dangers, which include, of course, digital fraud. On the part of the government or regulatory agencies for the internet, is there a way that they can step up their game so that if we're having a discussion about broadband technology, it can be in tandem with how to control the usage of social media so as not to, shoot ourselves in the leg? Because at the end of the day, I mean, we're already seeing hackers. We are in a continent where we don't even have, high enough access to technology, but we're seeing people make the most of the little that they have. So imagine having better access to technology. Definitely, this is going to be a continuous conversation of, hacking and those illegal activities online. So how can we better monitor the usage?
It's a good question. And of course, this is always a balancing act between censorship and freedom of speech and transparency around and avoiding, sort of censorship or the feeling that your activities are being managed. I think ultimately education of the users and being able to use in so many things in life, like they say, you'll say Lagos is dangerous or New York is dangerous. Well, it's about common sense. It's about some street smarts. And the same goes for the digital highways. It's about getting onto a website and looking at your URL strip at the top, and it says this is not, you can clearly see this might not be a safe site to go to. It's to say, this person has just engaged me online, but do I know who they are? Do I know where they are? Am I asking the right questions? So I think a lot of the empowerment of the user and the education of the users, I think, will go as quickly as any kind of over-regulation of the industry.
Right. In towing the line of that as well, we are also familiar with the fact that kidnapping has become the order of the day, especially in Nigeria. And of course, we also still have cyber stalking. We also have identity theft and things like that. And we've heard time and time again that, the government, the security agencies are looking into it. In fact, they've promised that they will boost the defense budget. But at the same time, we're not exactly seeing the sophisticated, defense tools that they promised. We're not exactly seeing a better management of the digital space. So on the part of the government, what do you think they can do in terms of defense, at least to prepare ourselves for these kind of things? Because, of course, kidnapping can also, be done digitally. And a lot of times we've also talked about the fact that some of these kidnappers make videos of their victims and even post online, but still we can't track their location. So what can the government and the security sector do to that regard?
Well, again, there is again that balance. I think the technologies exist to be able to triangulate, for example, and locate a base station to which a kidnapper may be speaking from, so that you can localize where activity is or where someone is being held. All those tools do exist. And again, the key is to ensure that these tools are not used, in the wrong way. And I think, once again, not to beat a dead horse, but to the extent that Nigerians feel like if these kinds of tools will not be misused by their governments, by their security agencies, I think they'll be happy to see it used more. But to the extent people feel like this could be flipped and used against us for any number of reasons, then this is something that people are not comfortable with. So again, ultimately, hopefully, broadband in general and technology makes people improve their livelihoods, and ultimately, hopefully, people resort to those options less often. But again, that is a slightly longer road for us to tow.
All right, that has been a very insightful conversation. Thank you so much, Diseye isoun, expert on African broadband and digital infrastructure. We're really hopeful that at least, if anything, we can have better access to technology, because I know for a fact that African youths are very illustrious, and this is one of the things that would help them further establish themselves as young people. We do not always have to wait for the government or the job infrastructure. We can make the most of what we have, but what we have has to be good enough for us to work with. So once again, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts on this.
And thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You're still live with us on Fafano Africa, and we just talked about broadband technology, and that is not all the conversation we'll be having today, because after the break, we'll be going into something else that is very, very pivotal